and the Belarusian American Youth Organization, I would like to welcome you to the commemoration of the 76th anniversary of the Proclamation of Belarusian independence. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led for us today by Adam Grant.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Adam. Please remain standing for the Molitva, led by Father Vasil from the St. Mary of Zurovice, Belarusian Autocephalous Orthodox Church in Highland Park. Отец Василий.
Во имя Отца и Сына и Святого Духа, теперь и сейчас, и на веки веков. Аминь. Отче наш, небесный, святись имя Твое, приди владарство Твое, дистанция воля Твоя, на небе, так и на земле. Хлеба нашу, что темного, дай нам сяня, и выбачь наши провины, як и мы выбачаем виноватым пред нами. Не веди нас в спокусу, а избавь нас от злого. Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй, Господи, помилуй. Сам Господи Иисусе, Сыне Божий, поблагослови ежу и сильфи, что приготовили, будут споживаться теперь весь час и на веки веков. Аминь.
You may be seated. It's been a year since we last met on this occasion, and I'd like to take a moment to recap some key points since our last gathering. 1993. On April 20, the Belarusian embassy opens in Washington, D.C. July 6th, the third All-Belarusian Political Conference takes place in Minsk. On July 8 to 10, the first convention of Belarusians of the world takes place in Minsk. Many of us participated in these last two events, and I'm sure they have left their indelible mark. On July 21 to 23, a Belarusian delegation, headed by Chairman of Parliament Stanislaw Shushkevich, visits Washington and meets with President Clinton. On September 4th, 25th Congress of the Belarusian American Association takes place in Highland Park, New Jersey, and is unable to elect a new president for lack of a willing, suitable candidate. October 15th, President Clinton, in his answer to Baz's gratitude to him for having met with Chairman of the Belarusian Parliament, Stanislaw Shushkevich, stresses the strong interest of the United States in expanding economic ties with Belarus. November 14th, celebration of the 90th birthday of Natalia Arsenyeva at the Hyatt Regency in Nyu Brансвік. In the fall of '93, the exhibition Живе Беларусь of paintings by Belarusian artists abroad in Minsk, which included Tamara Stahanovich-Kolba, Halina Rusak, Irena Rahalevich, Nadia Kudasova, and others. In November of '93, publication of the documentary book in Belarusian and English by Zenon Pazniak and Ohin Shmihalov, Kudapati, a major source of evidence of Bolshevik genocide in Belarus. In 1994, January 15th, President and Mrs. Hillary Clinton visit Minsk. January 26th, the Supreme Soviet of Belarus dismisses its chairman, Stanislaw Shushkevich, for his defense of Belarusian statehood and economic reforms. In Shushkevich's place, Vyacheslav Hid is elected. February 11th, the Supreme Soviet decides to hold presidential elections in the first half of 1994 and parliamentary elections in the second half of the year. February 15th, thousands of political strikers organized by the Strikers Committee and the Belarusian Popular Front demanding Minsk and other cities dismissal of the Kiev government and new elections to the Supreme Soviet. As Belarus continues to struggle towards its goals, we, the Belarusian emigration and second and third generation of Americans of Belarusian heritage, must continue to support our homeland in its valiant striving for true democracy, successful economic reforms, and inalienable human rights. Please hold your applause until all the proclamations have been read.
Proclamation, State of New Jersey. Whereas I commend Americans of Belarusian descent as they celebrate the 76th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of the Belarusian Democratic Republic. And whereas I affirm the diligence and tenacity of the Belarusian people in their fight to regain complete sovereignty and independence and to participate and enjoy a true democratic government. And whereas I acknowledge the effort of the Belarusian American Association for their commitment for restoring democracy in their homeland. And whereas I praise the decision of the people of the Belarus to rid their nation of nuclear weapons in an attempt to enhance peace throughout the world. And whereas I join the people of Belarus in recognizing the importance of democratic and economic reforms in an endeavor to improve the quality of life for Belarusians. Now, therefore, I, Christine Todd Whitman, Governor of the State of New Jersey, do hereby proclaim Belarusian Independence Day, March 25th, 1994.
Proclamation, Office of the Mayor, City of New York. Whereas the Belarusian community is observing the 76th anniversary of the proclamation of the Belarus Democratic Republic on March 25th, 1918, and whereas between 1890 and 1920, more than 500,000 Belarusians emigrated to the United States, leaving their beautiful homeland to seek new lives here. Their first organization was formed in 1920 on Park Row across from City Hall. After World War II, about 50,000 additional immigrants arrived here, fleeing oppression. Today, many students, professors, and future leaders from Belarus come here to study technology, economics, government, and other subjects that will help them contribute to their own country, while many New Yorkers travel to Belarus to offer assistance and advice. And whereas the Belarusian American community contributes to the vitality and diversity of our city and shares its rich heritage with all New Yorkers, it preserves the treasures of the Belarusian language and tradition and celebrates the nation's independence, which was reaffirmed on July 27, 1990, the Day of Sovereignty. And whereas today we especially remember that Belarus was devastated by the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, 70% of the fallout which landed on Belarus, contaminating 1/3 of the country, infecting more than 2.2 million people, including relatives in many New Yorkers. While scientists, physicians, and other New Yorkers rush to assess the damage, seek solutions, and bring much-needed medical supplies and other help, the long-range effects will not be known for years. Now, therefore, I, Rudolph W. Giuliani, Mayor of the City of New York, in recognition of this important anniversary, do hereby proclaim Sunday, March 27, 1994, in the City of New York as Belarusian Independence Day. the office of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, United States Senate. Thank you for informing me of the activities of the Belarusian American Association in preparing for the 76th annual anniversary of the proclamation of the independent Belarusian Democratic Republic. Like you, I look forward to the day when Belarus has a stable economy and government representing the will of the people. I strongly support the efforts of those who continue to work to nurture democratic reforms and representational government for the people of Belarus. Many challenges must still be overcome. I agree with you that Belarus is an important country which has the potential to be a strong force for peace, stability, and for rule of law among nations. Both the United States and Belarus should strive to cultivate a stronger bilateral relationship based on shared values. I wish the Belarusian American Association success in achieving that goal. Sincerely, Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Thank you for your recent letter concerning the 76th anniversary of the proclamation of the independent Belarusian Democratic Republic. Please be assured that I respect and share your commitment to safeguarding human rights worldwide. As a member of the Advisory Board of the Congressional and Human Rights Foundation and the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, I'm also working toward this important goal. My office will continue to stress the importance of respect for human rights by all countries having bilateral relations with the United States, including Belarus. Please accept my best wishes on this important anniversary. Sincerely, Paul D. Coverdell, United States Senator from Georgia.
This is from the Office of the Governor, State of California. The cause of freedom is a continuing focus and never-ending work. To promote, maintain, and expand the right of self-determination is the duty of every one of us. For an attack on the rights of one can enable the restriction of all. While the 20th century has witnessed unprecedented autonomy, every day millions of people are denied the same independence that as Americans we claim as our birthright. Because of this, we must always remember those who wage the quiet and lonely battle for freedom. They deserve and have earned our support. On this day, I am honored to join with Belarusian people everywhere as they commemorate their independence. This important celebration began in 1918, only to be prohibited a year later by the communist totalitarian regime that called itself the Soviet Union. Since the breakup of that evil empire, Belarusians once again have the opportunity to be free. This is by no means certain, and it can only become a reality through the toil of those who would risk their life in the establishment of freedom and the defense of liberty. Please accept my very best wishes for a memorable celebration and every continued success in your important work. Signed, Pete Olson.
Thank you for your letter of February 28th, informing me of the Belarusian American Association's plans to commemorate the 76th anniversary of the founding of the Belarusian National Republic on March 25th, 1918. I sincerely appreciate your providing me with this opportunity to voice my support for the nation of Belarus. Belarus can trace its beginnings back to the medieval state of Kievan Rus and to the Principality of Polotsk. But unfortunately, much of its long history is one of domination by its neighbors. Despite those many centuries of foreign rule, however, the Belarusian nation again sought its independence in March 1918, only to have it crushed by the communist Soviet Union. Today, Belarus, like the other newly liberated states of that former communist empire, must overcome the social, economic, and environmental legacy of 7 decades of communist rule that the independence it won yet again in August 1991 is to be assured. That legacy is truly formidable, ranging from the need to build an entirely new political and economic system to the need to overcome the disastrous effects of the radiation released by the explosion of the Soviet-designed Chernobyl nuclear reactor in 1986. I am pleased that the United States has begun to assist Belarus in this effort with both humanitarian and technical assistance as well as with funds to help it dismantle the nuclear armaments left on its territories after the collapse of the Soviet army. With such assistance, I am truly hopeful that the nation of Belarus can at long last take its rightful place in the ranks of the international community and perhaps more important, as an anchor for stability in Eastern Europe. Again, thank you for your letter informing me of the commemoration to be held this weekend on the occasion of the declaration of the Belarusian National Republic. Please accept my best wishes for the cause of peace, democracy and economic prosperity for the nation of Belarus. Yours sincerely, Benjamin A. Gilman, Ranking Republican Member, Committee of Foreign Affairs.
A теперь будем mieć wielką przyjemność. Почуем молодого белорусского композитора Змитрака Евтуховича и молодую пригожую белорусскую śpiewaczку z cudownym lirycznym głosem Irynę Mazylewą. Oni prześpiewają nam kilka pieśni.
Ірина учиться в Джульєт Скул, Нью-Йорк, по классу вокала. И мы зараз збираємо репертуар, целую программу. И я включила твор белорусского композитора замежа Миколы Куликовича Штеглова «Танго Васильки».
Нас с тобой восьми.
не вучыўся лясу вакала, я вучыўся як кампазітар і паспрабую сваім скрипучым голасам заспяваць вам сваю песню, якую, можа, вы ўжо чулі. Яна называецца «Даставай, Язэп, гармонік». Дым костра дубяна горки над озерами паузе, в затоках дремлет зорки, белелеи на воде. Не сумуй, моя сябровка, полны новых слез не ли, завершается вандровка по воде и по земле, завершается вандровка по воде и по земле. Доставай, 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 Язэп, гармоник, вечер стелет туманы. Заиграй, 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 мы вспомним дни без луну и маны. Развитаться не поспели, развитаться не смогли, и не сказали, что хотели, что на вот им берегли. Тресня таємний шолох, сумом серця опять же, на Браславских на озерах мы зустрінемся яще, на Браславских на озерах мы зустрінемся яще. Доставай, 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 Язэп, гармоник, вечер стелет туманы. Заиграй, 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 мы вспомним дни без луну и маны. Доставай, 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 Язэп, гармоник, вечер стелет туманы. Заиграй, 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 мы вспомним дни без луну и маны. Доставай, 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 Язэп, гармоник, вечер стелет туманы. Заиграй, 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 мы вспомним дни без луну и маны. З Беларусі Васіля Раінчыка на вершы, может быть, так само вядомага вам паэты, які сюды прыязджаў у Злучаныя Штаты, на вершы Леоніда Франчака. Называется это «Урачыстая песня». Мы ее посвящаем нашему святу. «Живе Беларусь».
Беларусь,
tape or record of your songs together. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. He is an historian who always represents Belarus with intellect and insight at a multitude of American, Canadian, European, and Belarusian conferences and symposiums, author of the recently released Belarus at a Crossroads in History, and currently professor at Columbia University teaching history and politics of Belarus, Dr. Janka Zaprutin.
Thank you, Vera Zaprudnik, for a nice introduction. Reverend clergy, ladies and gentlemen, festivities like ours, although held on Sundays, have a practical and mundane side to them. Once every year, we come together in order to assess the political situation in Belarus and express our collective opinion about the facts and trends that take place in the country from which many of us came. Our views, wishes, and hopes will be set forth today, as has been done traditionally, in a resolution for which everybody present here is asked to vote. It must be said forthrightly that never before has our stance been so crucially important to Belarus as it is at the present time. Belarus, on her turbulent historical path, has arrived at a crossroads in history. The Republic has just adopted a new constitution. Elections of a president will be held in the first half of this year. Parliamentary elections will follow within the next 6 months. In 1995, we shall see, according to the official calendar, local elections, which will also be very important for the future of the country. The world press has taken a dim view of recent developments in Belarus. There are grim warnings about the Russian Empire being resurrected. The leader of the Belarusian Popular Front, Zenon Pozniak, is sounding the tocsin about the threat of Russian imperialism. Other Belarusian legislators also speak of the ongoing process of reincorporation of Belarus back into the Russian Empire. A recent analysis of the political scene in Belarus in the Moscow daily Izvestia, February 24th, was published under the heading Belarus Back into the USSR. It is true, some influential observers view the situation differently, as less threatening. For example, former President Richard Nixon, freshly back from Moscow, writes in the New York Times of March 25th, quote, "The claim that Russia is again becoming an imperialist power is exaggerated." And Mr. Nixon acknowledges the importance for America of the independence of all the former Soviet states. We know that President Clinton also appreciates the importance of independence of these states, including Belarus, as did President George Bush, who originally extended the recognition of independence to Minsk in December 1991. It is evident from the greetings we have received for this observance that the cause of an independent Belarus enjoys strong support also in the United States Congress as well. Unfortunately, the US government does not always follow through consistently with appropriate implementation of the policies it articulates. A document that is presently being prepared in Washington for the US government by a research firm dealing with issues in the former Soviet republics says accurately, quote, "The recognition that Belarus must do more to take care of itself, coupled with the coming of elections, provides a climate for engagement by the United States in the process of change in Belarus." Indeed, the catchword of the day in Washington in its relations with Belarus should be engagement. Engagement not so much with money as with expertise, experience, and people. Scholars, educators, lawyers, business persons, and yes, ordinary citizens. Basically, we are back to an idea that President Eisenhower rightly advanced at the end of the 1950s. I mean, people-to-people contacts. The leader of the Belarusian Popular Front, Zenon Pozniak, arguing against granting any Western credits for the current pro-communist regime in Belarus, said in December last year, "We don't need Westerners' money. We have our own hands and intellect. But we need people to inform us, to visit us, to study our situation, and to help us develop public opinion." Indeed, freely expressed public opinion, as we know from our own lives in this country, is the mainstay of democracy. Presently, among the Democrats in Belarus, there is an acute sense of isolation. Telephone connections are sporadic and unreliable. Mail from abroad doesn't arrive. Postal service is such that it is impossible in the United States to receive newspapers and periodicals from Belarus on a regular basis, which means that it is impossible to fully learn what's going on there. Isolation is a favorite tool of autocratic regimes and a powerful brake on the process of democratic change. At the beginning of this month, People's Deputy Jurais Bilinki, you remember him, he addressed us, our rally, a year ago in this very room. Contacted by telephone Mrs. Kalinowski-Tatum, a lady who is among us today, on behalf of the Belarusian Popular Front and the democratic opposition in the Supreme Soviet, that petitions be sent to us by us to all possible quarters asking for outside monitors in Belarus to observe the upcoming presidential and parliamentary elections. This request is reflected in the resolution that will be presented to your approval today. There are other important ways of supporting democracy in Belarus. A member of the Belarusian parliament with whom I spoke over the phone last Friday answered my question, "Do you like the new constitution?" with a firm no. And he quickly added, "In spite of the flaws in the constitution, we had to compromise. We had to adopt the document because we badly needed a legal barrier that would somehow hinder the nomenclatura's drive to reincorporate the Republic into the Russian Empire." This constitution, he said the deputy, will eventually be changed, improved. Much depends now, he emphasized, on what will be said and published about our constitution by American experts. This is just one of the situations where much hope is pinned on America, on us collectively, and on each of you individually, because democracy grows up from the grassroots, and public attention is both the moisture and the light of democracy. As anything precious, democracy is born in pain. And the process itself is slow, generational. The electorate in Belarus, which has just emerged from a totally different type of society, needs to be educated in democratic ways. Voters in Belarus are being manipulated by the mass media, which is still owned and controlled by the government. The level of political culture is low. Concepts such as human rights, civil society, non-governmental organizations, and private initiative all have to be explained, ingrained in the public consciousness, and guaranteed by appropriate legislation before the full advantages of these democratic processes can become beneficial. In other words, an entire infrastructure of democracy has to be built in the Republic of Belarus. Our immediate task is to make sure that Washington, and we are honored to have Congressman Frank Pallone as an official guest among us today, that Washington is aware of Belarus's needs and potentialities at this historic moment. Assistance to Belarus today means not so much money. Mere credits will only prolong the agony under the old crypto-communist regime, as it means contacts, exchanges, visits, direct acquaintance with the situation there, as was emphasized by the leader of the Democratic opposition, Mr. Pozniak, in his published interview last December. In spite of all the difficulties and trials it faces, a new Belarus is slowly and surely emerging from the rubble of the revolutionary changes going on there. As the historical past is being resurrected and slowly penetrates the national and political consciousness of the Belarusian people, this process is bound to facilitate the formation of a more dynamic society, able to solve itself economic, social, and cultural problems. What is crucially important is, in today's Belarus, is a release of energy from the people and a sensible regulation of this energy. The order of the day is building a civil society in the Republic. Although the number of democratic non-governmental organizations in Belarus is considerable, their activities are hampered by an insufficient awareness of the social and political potential which is embedded in the NGO movement, non-governmental organization movement. Perhaps the best indicator of this psychological insufficiency is the state of organizational underdevelopment of the legal profession itself, which should be in the forefront of any movement to constitute a civil society. The Union of Jurists of Belarus, for example, is said to exist on paper only. Its president, Vladimir Boyko, appealed to his colleagues in December '93 to seriously reform all the activities of the legal community of Belarus. Regrettably, there has not been much progress in this respect. In several letters to the editor published in the newspaper Respublika in January of this year, legal experts still complain about the lack of professional information and the poor coordination of activities of various groups of lawyers, a situation which they said does not contribute to the creation of a genuine legal state. On the one hand, if one measures, on the other hand, I'm saying, if one measures the mood of contemporary Belarus by what is being aired in the domestic media, remember that they are largely subsidized and thereby controlled by the government, one finds that there is a fair amount of criticism directed at officialdom and its policies. Especially critical of the government are some Belarusian language newspapers, in the forefront of which are the Writers' Weekly, Literatura и Мастатство, Literature and the Arts, the dailies Zvezda, Star, and the bilingual Narodnaya Gazeta, the People's Newspaper. The latter two newspapers have a circulation of around 200,000 and 500,000 copies, respectively. So this criticism is reaching a large reading public. The dynamic tension at work in the Republic could become a contributing factor to the activization of non-governmental organizations once the tenets and possibilities of a civil society become better known and more widely accepted by the population. A major psychological hurdle on the road to reform in Belarus is that the concepts of state, government, and self-government are insufficiently differentiated. By and large, citizens do not distinguish between the powers of officialdom on one hand and their own civil rights and organizational prerogatives on the other. The all-inclusive concept of state, держава, is a hindrance to grassroots initiatives and movements and an intimidating factor in the growth of non-governmental organizations. This concept of an all-powerful state must be broken down into its democratic component parts. And that's where the United States comes in with its spirit of civic freedoms, democratic experience, and specific examples of how to set up civic groups and conduct activities that involve discussion and voting. In this regard, each one of you, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps without consciously thinking about it, represents a so crucial both to the freedom of Belarus and to a peaceful and fruitful relationship between the United States of America and the newly emerging countries of Eastern Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zapruti, for some very good words. I now have the great privilege of introducing a very good friend of ours, the congressman from our 6th district here in Central Jersey, the Honorable Frank Pallone. Congressman Pallone.
Thank you very much, and I am really pleased that I came here today because I've already learned a lot. I have to tell you that, some of you may know that, I guess it was about 2 years ago now that when we changed the congressional districts, and I for the first time represented Nью Брансвік and Highland Park and some of the South River and some of the other towns in Middlesex County. And one of the things that I found out very quickly was that there was a very large Slavic community here, and in particular a Belarusian community. I was particularly interested in the Belarusian community because my wife, and we're only married now, I guess about 2 years, is Belarusian. Her father, or at least her great-grandparents, are actually 4th generation back, I guess, came from a village not too far from Minsk. And her name is Sarah Hospodor, H-O-S-P-O-D-O-R. I don't know much more than that. I don't really know much more than that. We've been trying to find out, more and more about her great-grandfather who came over here. We know that he came here, of course, when the Tsars were still in charge in Belarus and Russia as well. And one of the things that particularly interested me was back, I guess, in the 1990 or 1991, when the Soviet Union was breaking up. I watched one night and I saw a delegate from the Belarusian parliament who was in Moscow during the various meetings that were taking place there, a woman delegate who looked very much like Sarah. We were watching CNN one night and I said, gee, that delegate looks like she could be your sister. And it was amazing. I'd love to, at some point, try to find out who exactly that was. The reason that I'm here, though, is to basically commend all of you for continuing your activities, your ethnic heritage, and obviously also because you're very concerned about making sure that Belarus continues to be independent, that democratic traditions continue and expand there. I listened to what the professor just said, and in fact I have a copy of his book. And I also took a look at the resolution that was sent out, that was on each of the tables. And I would offer to all of you that I would very much like to be a sort of spokesman for your concerns. If I look at the four... If I look at some of the items that are mentioned in the resolution about human rights in the Republic, about the need for observers for the forthcoming election, medical assistance related to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, it seems to me that these are the types of things that we can work together on. Obviously, the professor made mention of the fact that we need more people in Washington talking about these concerns. I remember a few years ago, I guess it wasn't maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I first came into contact with a Ukrainian group that were very much involved with Chernobyl, and they had been actually coming to Washington and having me write letters. This is at the time when the Soviet Union was still intact, and they were asking me to write letters to make sure that medical assistance was reaching the victims, that it wasn't something that was going to be swept under the rug in terms of nuclear reactors in the old Soviet Union. And I was involved with some of the Ukrainian groups in trying to help in that regard. I could certainly do the same thing with all of you, particularly when you mentioned the need for observers. I don't know, I guess this is something you're hoping will happen. I'm not sure it will. But if you think that that's something that we can make an issue of on the floor of the House of Representatives through one of the things that we do from time to time is get different members of Congress who will perhaps devote an evening, an hour during what we call special orders to raise some of these issues. I see that Ben Gilman was mentioned here tonight. Perhaps I could contact Congressman Gilman and some of the others that might be concerned. We could devote a special order, an hour perhaps or so, or half an hour during special orders on the floor of the House to make the case of sending observers over to Belarus. I guess what I'm saying to all of you tonight or this afternoon is that I would be very willing to work on some of these things. I don't really know a lot about it. I'm a little embarrassed, I guess, in not even being able to tell you more about my wife's ancestry and how, and even where she came from. But hopefully, because of that connection, because so many of you are my constituents, we can work together on this cause. What I did is I guess this is sort of the beginning in that in Congress last Wednesday, March 23rd, we put into the congressional record a tribute to Belarusian independence, and I won't read it all, but maybe I could read just the beginning and the last part of it. It says in the beginning, Mr. Speaker, on Sunday, March 27th, the Belarusian American Association and the Belarusian American Youth Organization will commemorate the 76th anniversary of the Proclamation of Belarusian independence with a banquet and concert at the Hyatt Regency in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And we go on for several paragraphs to talk about the history of the Republic. And then in the last paragraph it says, Mr. Speaker, the Belarusian nation is particular significance for me on a personal level. My wife Sarah is part Belarusian, and through her I've learned about the proud people, their enduring culture, and their brave stand against foreign dominance and oppression. The Belarusian American community has made great contributions to the state of New Jersey and many other regions of the United States. Now that the Soviet Union is a thing of the past, the American people are finally learning about the many distinct nations who spent much of the century under the Soviet yoke. I hope that the coming years will see a continued emergence of both the nation of Belarus and of the Belarusian American community, as well as the recognition and respect they deserve from the people of the United States. I also hope that perhaps over the next few months I have an opportunity to meet more of you. I haven't been to St. Mary's in Highland Park. I've passed it several times, and I think one day Sarah and I went up to the door to see if it was open so we could take a look, but it was locked. We went to the other church in South River one day. We were there, and Sarah also was brought up in the Byzantine rite of the Roman Catholic Church. She was baptized and confirmed, so she has that religious background. I know that many of you are Orthodox, and I know there are many different religions in Belarus, but I'm also very much interested in the culture and the history as well. So thank you for inviting me today. I'll leave this with you, but hopefully this will be the beginning of a lot more work that we can do together. Thanks.
I would now like to make a motion to adopt the following resolution of the Assembly commemorating the 76th anniversary of the Proclamation of the Independence of the Belarusian Democratic Republic held in New Brunswick, New Jersey, Sunday, March 27, 1994. Whereas the first presidential elections ever held in the Republic of Belarus have been scheduled for some time before June 26, 1994, and whereas these presidential elections, if really held, could advance democracy in Belarus and improve chances for overcoming economic, social, and cultural crises, thus strengthening peace and cooperation in the region. And whereas human rights in the Republic of Belarus are being violated and civil liberties abridged, democratic opposition activists and free labor union leaders arrested and harassed by the official authorities. And whereas mass media in the Republic of Belarus are still under the government's control, inaccessible to democratic parties and groups, and public opinion is being manipulated by the officialdom. Therefore, we, the participants in this solemn assembly commemorating the 76th anniversary of the proclamation of the independence of the Belarusian Democratic Republic, unanimously resolve to inform the American people and the American authorities about facts concerning the abuse of human rights in the Republic of Belarus. Petition the United States government and appropriate American and international organizations to send observers to the Republic of Belarus during the upcoming presidential elections for the purpose of monitoring them. Continue seeking medical assistance for the people of Belarus suffering from the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and call the attention of the international community to the genocidal killings in 1937 through 1941 at Kuropati near Minsk, where nearly 250,000 innocent victims of the Stalinist regime lie unacknowledged and unrepented by Belarus's official authorities. And encourage American citizens, especially those with relatives in Belarus, to visit the Republic of Belarus because such visits widen international understanding, add to the business relations between Belarus and the United States, and advance the cause of democracy. Do I hear anyone seconding the motion? I gather that we unanimously approve this resolution.
I would like to introduce our next speaker, a longtime member of the Belarusian American Youth Organization, who is now one of the mainstays of the movement forward in reviving and formulating the focus to a strong and active mullet, Natalia Husak.
Good afternoon. I've been asked to speak about the future of today's youth organization, which both directly and indirectly affects our standing in this country and future celebrations such as today's. Most members of today's youth organization are first-generation Americans of Belarusian descent. Our position brings with it unique lessons and unique problems. As children, many of us learned to speak Belarusian and to defend the honor of a country that we had never seen and at that time were not likely to see. We learned in our small and large ways commitment, pride, and sacrifice. We learned to respond to questions such as, what is Belarus? Where is Belarus? And to defend ourselves when told we were the same as Russians or that we were communists. When we look back, we now recognize that one reason our youth organization was strong was because our friendships to each other were strong. However, we sometimes forget that friendships began or were strengthened because of our involvement in the Belarusian activities. For many of us, being a member of the youth organization also meant being a member of the folk dance group Gatэль and giving up Friday night movies and roller skating with our friends for dance practices or performances. We were often reluctant when strongly encouraged by our parents or dance teachers to attend each practice or a performance on a hot summer Saturday, but we attended. It never occurred to us that our fearless instructor, Dr. Oliver Romano, might have preferred to go out to dinner or a play on those many nights and over those many years that she instructed us. In fact, it probably did not occur to those of us in junior high school that someone beyond high school had a social life. Despite all of this, the dance group was one of the greatest focuses and strengths of the youth organization, and we came to take much pride in it. The examples of our dedicated parents and instructors made us care about our heritage and the people of Belarus. We also developed a network of Belarusian friends around the world through our youth participation and our dance group's involvement in Belarus, Canada, and many other places. We continue to retain strong ties with these friends. Belarus has come to a new era in history. It is now recognized as an independent country, and Belarusian has been officially accepted as its language. These are wonderful strides, and in some ways make the job of today's youth easier. Many Americans have now heard of Belarus, which cuts down on unnecessary explanations. However, this does not lessen the need for our support of Belarus. For as we know, Belarus has a long and difficult struggle ahead of it before it can achieve true democracy. At this point, our youth organization's greatest problem is the recruitment of young members. Last year's trip to Belarus enabled a few of us to attend a conference which called together various Belarusian youth organizations. Other than the heads of the scouting organization, we were the eldest youth present. The other groups were represented by true youth in their late teens and in their 20s. Several of us that can mark our 20th anniversary of youth membership would like to move on to other Belarusian memberships and activities, but we are faced with an obligation to establish a strong pool of younger members who wish to lead the organization. While our youth organization has reached a difficult point in its development, we recognize that there are many talented and eager young Belarusians with which we could strengthen and build our group. This year, St. Mary Robitsi's choir director, Nью Brансвіку, spent many hours leading the youth in Christmas carols. We hope not to lose his talent and positive presence, but rather to enlist him in our future endeavors. Next year, we also hope to enlist other young participants in this project. Many of us have been fortunate enough to find friends, spouses, and fiancés that are supportive and eager participants in our Belarusian activities. Many of them were not born with a drop of Belarusian blood, but somehow have grown a piece of a Belarusian heart. In addition, we have many new Belarusian faces in our community. Some we have only on loan, and others permanently. We know that to the relatively new residents of the United States, the survival of Belarus as an independent nation and cultural identity is as important and even more important than it is to us, since it is their homeland. As we welcome these new friends and hope to help them build their lives in the U.S., we invite their input and membership in our activities. A sample of their enthusiasm is Anya and Anatol Simichuk's organization and hosting of Belarusian New Year's celebrations. That kind of spirit is always needed in our community. Finally, we do have a new and currently growing generation of young Belarusian children, a second generation of American Belarusians who are learning their heritage as well as the Belarusian language. Since aunts are permitted to vote, I'm proud to say that my nephews and niece were involved in the beginning of this trend. My sister and brother-in-law made it the practice in their home that my family only speaks in Belarusian to the children and they respond with kind. This structure can at times lead to interesting situations. Once at my nephew's soccer game, I was cheering Viaji, Viaji, because my nephew had possession of the ball. I was the only person shouting in Belarusian. A stranger approached me and introduced himself, saying, "Hi, you must be new this sister." As a result of the children's bilingualism, a new group of American children is growing up already knowing what Belarus is, and as you can see, many new American adults now know as well. We can look forward to the contribution of the coming generation. However, we cannot simply wait for them if we want our youth organizations to survive. Our problem may be rather, fortunately, it does not appear that we lack talented people. Our problem may be rather that they or their parents are not sufficiently aware of our activities or our interest in having them as participants in our group. There are many avenues into which the youth may expand to satisfy the different needs and qualifications of its members. Some of the following ideas could be developed. 1. Establishing a procedure for sending out information about Belarus to media representatives, particularly those who misstate facts concerning Belarus. A position may be created for a media officer in a youth organization to oversee the media's reports. One example of the media's past misunderstanding was the media's failure to recognize Chernobyl's effects on Belarus at the time of the disaster. 2. Developing contacts with our government officials and various organizations with the goal of encouraging them to actively promote the holding of elections in Belarus, which has been delayed so many times, as well as an international monitoring of those elections. In addition, our government is clearly interested in supporting efforts at democratization, and sadly, without some recognition and support from the United States, democratization may never be fully realized in Belarus, or may be only realized on paper, with the communists retaining true control. A domestic matter that should be addressed is that of gaining input into the decisions of the Central Eastern European Law Initiative, known as CELIC. It's an American Bar Association organization that sends American lawyers to Belarus and other countries to assist with legal reform. CELIC recently sent a Russian-speaking advisor to Belarus and is in the process of sending a Russian-language handbook on law firm practice to Belarus. While these Russian resources may be the only resources available to them, other options should have been explored by CELIC. Unfortunately, CELIC fails to appreciate the importance of the Belarusian language issue to us. We should make a formal demand to be consulted in their decisions concerning Belarus. 3. Establishing a procedure for welcoming new Belarusian emigres and visitors to our community, meeting with them to familiarize them with American customs and to answer their questions or concerns. 4. A mailing could be organized to our local schools to educate them about Belarus. There are also other methods of educating our schools. As you may be aware, a sibling of mine, who shall remain nameless, volunteered for services as a teacher of Belarusian language to the 3rd grade class in my nephew's school, thus educating a small portion of the young American community through new means, while at the same time contributing to the Belarusian community. 5. Another means of involving younger children in our group may be to establish a pen pal for them in Belarus, as well as in Belarusian communities in other countries. It makes the whole Belarusian experience more real to them. 6. Exhibits and information groups may be hosted at ethnic festivals, such as the forthcoming festival in Boston. To conclude, I believe one goal of the youth is to educate the public about Belarus, and in so doing, help support Belarus's struggle for a national democratic identity. If the American community were more knowledgeable about Belarus, its problems would be more difficult to ignore. We have wonderful resources at our disposal, such as the Belarusian Review. The editor happens to be very sympathetic toward the youth and develops the publication with the youth in mind. Other goals are to recruit new members and thus provide for future assistance to Belarus and future celebrations of Belarusian independence. To raise American Belarusian children with a sense of pride in their heritage and involvement in their extended community. To ensure that the youngest of the emerging American Belarusian children no longer have to explain what or where Belarus is. And to ensure that our children are no longer required to educate people about the hundreds of thousands of Belarusians killed under Stalin's rule, because those people will already have learned that fact in school. In order to accomplish our goals, we look to the parents of school-aged children and to our young adults for their involvement and support in our activities. Thank you.
Nata, thank you for those prophetic words. It's a view that I personally have long held. We must focus some of our attention to incoming knowledge. If we don't replenish our pool of talent, inspiration, dedication, and Belarusian spirit, will we be able to continue to celebrate this commemoration for the next 40-some years? Parents, grandparents, look around. Do you see your children, your grandchildren here? If not, ask yourselves why. Ask yourselves, what can I do about it? What the Belarusian American Youth Organization is doing about it is sponsoring a weekend for children at the resort Belarusian of Belarusian heritage, culture, crafts, some history, and a lot of fun, the weekend of July 30th and 31st. If you want to put some of the Belarus back into Belarusian American, support the efforts of the Belarusian American Youth Organization and participate in this weekend of Belarusian soul and spirit. And now I ask Dr. Janka Zaprudnik to resume the podium.
Нам вельми приємно вітати тут наших дорогих гостей з Білорусі. У пособку господара Владимира Гончаронка з Вашингтону, наша дипломата, який передасть вам привітання від посла Республіки Білорусь Сергія Мартинова. It's a pleasure and honor to have among us diplomats representing Belarusian government, the Belarusian embassy in Washington, and Mr. Vladimir Goncharonak will read greetings from His Excellency Ambassador Sergei Martynov, representing the Republic of Belarus in the United States. Mr. Goncharonak.
Белорусско-американской ассоциации, Белорусско-американской молодежной организации, Нью Брансвік, Нью Джэрзі. Поважане господарство, шлю вам щире привітання з черговими угодками 25 сакавіка. Традиції білоруської самосвідомості і незалежності, які змацовувалися в ті часи, набули своє справжнє особлення з обвешченням суверенітету нашої родної Білорусі. Вельми почесна справа дальнейшего развития самостойности батьківщини, безумовно, варто того, как бы надалей отдавать свою энергию и творчие силы, як робили всі сумлінні білоруси на протягу десятиліттів, знаходячися в далечині від дім. Єдність білорусів світу, їх огульна відданість справі нашої держави – це те, що будує незалежну націю. Щиро хочу вам завсюди заставатися носителями духа білоруськості, здоров'я і поспіху всім соотечественникам. З глибокою повагою, посол Мартинов.
Я хочу пригадати, що тут їм його непригожа господарня Марія Гончаронок. Ми вельми раді, що нарешті дочекалися в Нью-Йорку генерального консуля Республіки Білорусь. Без його, як без ног, нікуди не поїдеш. Без візи сьогодні нема руху. Господар Каравайка, наш давний приятель, он был на нашем святкаванне летось, І ми вельми раді бачити його тут, вітати його тут серед нас і послухати його слово привітання до нас. Mr. Leonid Karavayka is General Counsel of the Republic of Belarus in New York, a very important person because he issues visas. So here we are welcome Mr. Karavayka.
Уважаемое господарство, щиро віншую вас от ім'я Генерального консульства Республіки Беларусь у городі Нью-Йорку, яке нарешті відкрилося і сапраўды можна отримати візу для поїздки на Беларусь. Лечу, что мне пощастило, потому что уже другий год запар я приезжаю святкаваць 76-ю гадавіну абвешчання незалежнасці Беларускай Народнай Рэспублікі менавіта сюды ў Нью Брансвік. Шмат чаго адбылося на радзіме і ў свеце за мінулы год. Сусвет крочыць наперад. Але ў такія дні, як сённяшні, хочацца азірнуцца назад і ўзважыць, ці ўсё ты зрабіў дзеля адраджэння бацькаўшчыны, дзеля росквіту яе, дзеля лепшага лёсу нашых дзяцей. Беларусы. Колькі іх раскіданых лёсам па свеце, колькі дарог. Дарагі беларусы, праз смугу гадоў цябе вабіць красой Беларусь небыча. У якіх бы краёх ты не быў, уваччу далягляд гэты лес і рамонкавы луг. Па дарогах жыцця, у вандраваннях па свеце ты не страціў збярог найдарожчы свой скарб, самабытную матчыну мову. Без яе як з'яднаць свае сэрцы братам беларусам. Людзі добрыя, будем добрымі, будем шукаць адзін аднаго і знаходзіць. Будем разам, будем як адна сям'я, бо мы варты існаваць на гэтай беднай, але адзінай для нас боскай зямлі. На ўспамін прыходзяць словы Васіля Быкова, сказаныя ім на першым з'ездзе беларусаў свету. Пэўна ж, як і ўсё пад сонцам, яна недасканалая, яна будзе развівацца і мяняцца, калі мы пакарыстаемся ёю. Але мы змушаны будзем карыстацца менавіта ёю, бо іншага выйсця ў нас няма. Бо ў нас яна засталася апошняй. Можа, яшчэ гісторыя дасць нам час, кончык стагоддзя, не болей. І мы ўрэшце зацвердзім перад ёй і Богам, перад сваімі нашчадкамі, на што здольныя мы, век пагарджаныя, ашуканыя, прададзеныя беларусы. Ці варты мы існаваць на гэтай беднай, спустошанай, атручанай радыенуклідамі, але адзінай для нас боскай зямлі. Я веру в наш народ і хачу паўтарыць, мы варты існаваць на гэтай боскай зямлі. Беларусы ўсіх краёў, яднайцеся, нас няшмат, а будзе менш яшчэ, як адступім, зломімся пад націскам, як ад нас рашучасць уцячэ. Праз усе вякі нас толькі ціснулі і хадзіць хацелі, як патлі. Нас душылі волгамі і вісламі, кожны тужыў зашмарку пятлі. Нас турылі з бацькаўшчыны, з дзедзіны, нам панам крывіцкай зямлі. Котласы, Чарнобылі адведзены, маем права мы на мазалі. Нас палілі, катавалі, раталі, малацілі нас, не выкулі. Каралі, забойцы, імператары і бацькі працоўных мас. Калі Беларусь як палатніну кроілі на мундзіры ды на кафтаны, каб магілы з нашымі героямі уціскалі валуны маны, над святынямі паруйнаванымі паклянёмся дбаць пра карані. Будем янками, а не Иванами, что не ведают свои родни. Працавали мы на всей империи, попрацуем на себе, браты. Дык одродимся душой и верою, з нами Батька Бог и Дух Святый. Цудовные слова Григора Барадулина. На завершение, як представник Республики Беларусь у Нью-Йорку и супрацовник Міністерства замежных справ Республики Беларусь, хотел бы, користаючись нагодой, так само поинформовать шановне господарство о даті, яка увійшла в історію дипломатичної служби Республики у післявоєнний період, як обновлення діяльності Міністерства замежних справ. 24 сакавіка 1944 года 6-я сессия Верховного Совета Белорусской ССР приняла закон об утворении Союзно-Республиканского народного комиссариата замежных справ СССР. Сегодня Министерство замежных справ Республики Беларусь выходит у своей деятельности с задач максимально полного забезпечения национальных интересов Беларуси как суверенной державы, переутворения республики в безъядерную и нейтральную Украину, наладжування і розвиття повномасштабних двохбокових союзів з заміжними країнами, у тим ліку со Злученими Штатами Америки, забезпечення повноцінного уділу Білорусі у шматбоковому співпрацівництві у межах міжнародних організацій. З нагоди этой знаменальной даты отводится урочистое посещение супрацовников Министерства замежных справ з уділом керівництва республіки і громадськості, на яким буде підсумовано зроблене, будуть ушановані ветерани і ведучі роботники Білоруської дипломатичної служби, окреслені основні орієнтири діяльності на наступний період. У этой сувязі Генеральное консульство Республики Беларусь у городе Нью-Йорку бачить сенс своего дальнейшего існування у наступному. Скажу словами поэта Геннадия Буралкина. Работа, 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 до змори, до стоми тяжкой, на користь своей родине. Живе Беларусь! Живе!
Вельми приємна новина. У нашей церкви Жировицкой Божьей Матери у Хайленд Парку организовался вокально-инструментальный ансамбль под керівництвом Петра Скепки. Я попрошу их, пианистчане, первый раз нам выступять. Я попрошу Элю, я попрошу Таису, Марию и Петра Калинаска. Зачитайте нам.
Of youth organizations throughout Belarus, which provided and opened the pathways for the Belarusian Popular Front. Our speaker also taught Belarusian language in the first Belarusian humanitarian professional school, as well as being a freelance correspondent of Radio Liberty. I give you Олеся Шомуха.
Я бы хотела колькі слова сказаць пра той уплыў, які сённяшняя дата, 25 сакавіка, аказала на прагалошэнне незалежнасці ў 91 годзе. Адна з кніг Юркі Вітвіча, добра нам усім вядомая, пачынаецца і канчаецца словамі: «Мы дойдзем. Не сумняваюся, дойдзем. Памагі нам Бог». Як сказаў бы лінгвіст, у заклічы гэтым не сцвярджэнне, а пабуджэнне. Тады было не ўпэўненасць, але жаданне, імкненне асягнуць мэту. Мэту, якая толькі паспела абвясціць сябе пра сябе актам 25 сакавіка, але якая на пачатку стагоддзя яшчэ не здолела сябе абараніць. Спрэчкі пра жыццёвасць і нежыццёвасць Беларускай Народнай Рэспублікі ў той канкрэтнай палітычнай сітуацыі могуць весціся бясконца гісторыкамі і палітазнаўцамі. Не гэта важна. Больш важнае тое, што палітычная свядомасць і воля беларусаў ужо 76 гадоў таму, а гэта 3 пакаленні перад намі цяперашнімі, ужо даспела да разумення сябе як нацыянальна-дзяржаўнай асобнасці. Паняцце нацыянальнай дзяржавы нават у палітычным слоўніку заходнееўрапейскіх народаў з'явілася толькі 2-3 стагоддзі таму. Не так даўно, калі мераць час у каардынатах гісторыі народаў, а не аднога чалавечага жыцця. Для беларусаў жа яшчэ 19-е стагоддзе было патрапным вызначэнне нашай нівы бяздомнае. Не было сфармаванага агульнага пагляду на тэрыторыю, этнічную прыналежнасць, мову, нават на самую назву. І ўжо ў 20-м стагоддзі дзяржаўнасць у той ці іншай форме абвяшчаецца вось ужо 3-й раз. Прычым палітычныя умовы, у якіх 3,5 гады таму была прынятая дэкларацыя пра дзяржаўны суверэнітэт і ў жніўні 1991 году абвешчаная незалежнасць, непараўнальна лепшыя за тыя, што мы мелі ў 20-е гады. Летом 1991 году мы не абгрунтоўвалі свайго права на незалежнасць. Мы вярталі яго. Не было пачатковых цяжкасцяў прызнання нашай незалежнасці міжнароднай супольнасцю. Беларусь ужо мела свой голас у найбуйнейшай і найбольш уплывовай міжнароднай арганізацыі у ААН. Ніводная дзяржава на час абвешчання незалежнасці не мела да нас тэрытарыяльных прэтэнзіяў. Мы не вялі ваенных дзеянняў, і на нашай тэрыторыі не вяліся ніякія ваенныя дзеянні. Мы мелі амаль дакладна акрэсленыя дзяржаўныя і рэспубліканска-адміністратыўныя межы. Урэшце, у нашым запасе былі не толькі мовазнаўчыя этнаграфічныя доследы ды літаратурная практыка. Нашым грунтам быў прэцэдэнт абвяшчэння незалежнай дзяржавы ВНР і досвед будавання хоць і залежнай, але ўсё ж рэспублікі БССР. І хоць мы добра ведаем, што сённяшняя заканадаўчая ўлада Беларусі не надта спяшаецца прызнаць сябе спадкаемцам таго палітычнага скарбу, які пакінула нам ВНР, усё ж гэтым скарбам яна карыстаецца. Суверэнітэт не быў нам падараваны. Здабылі мы яго не з выпадковасці, не па інерцыі і не дзякуючы адным высілкам суседзяў, як цяпер часам кажуць. На гэта была воля некалькіх пакаленняў, у тым ліку і беларусаў дыяспары ў Злучаных Штатах Амерыкі. Воля, якую Віцбіч выразіў заставанымі мною на пачатку словамі «Мы дойдзем». Як вы ведаеце, 25 сакавіка дагэтуль не прынятае як дзяржаўнае свята ў Беларусі. Але я думаю, гэта справа бліжэйшай будучыні. І спадзяюся, што беларусы такі здольныя будуць выбраць Верхоўную Раду, а не Савет, якая гэты дзень справядліва ўшануе як сімвалічную кропку, ад якой пачынаецца гісторыя нацыянальнай дзяржавы. Дзякуй.
It is my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, the respected president of the National Belarusian American Association, a man who has very aptly been described as the soul of the Belarusian emigration. Please welcome Mr. Antoine Shukile.
Достойный ojcze, вельми поважання гості, господарині і господарі. Як тут ви вже чули, сьогодні і в цьому році ми відзначаємо аж нескільки юбілеїв, а проча юбілею, якому сьогодні присвячається ця урочистість, це 76 угодків абвешчання актом 25 сакавіка незалежності Белорусской Народной Республики. Тут уже успоминал нам уважаемый господар Каравайка, головный консуль Республики Беларусь, что выпадают так само угодки нашей дипломатичной акции. Я хочу так само при этой нагоде припомнить, что у этом годе выпадают 50-е угодки другого всебелорусского конгрессу, який подтвердил акт 25 сакавіка. А теперь я хочу передать привітання белорусско-американского зачиночення, яке було вислано при допомозі наших служб інформації на Батьківщину. Хочу одразу сказати, що воно не буде такое веселое, як ви тут чули некоторые промови. Воно буде відбивати політичну позицію белорусской эмиграции на основе тих весток, які до нас доходять з Батьківщини, і особливо у опошні часи. Поважання суродичі на Батьківщині і на чужині. В ім'я вольної, демократичної білоруської держави, головне право белорусско-американського зачиночення вітає вас з 76-ми угодками обвещення 3-ї уставної грамоти Ради БНР незалежності Белорусской Народной Республики. Идеалы акту 25 сакавіка, сформулированные у другой уставной грамоте Рады Белорусской Народной Республики 9 сакавіка 1918 года, вольность слова, друг, сходов, забастовок, хаурусов, безумовная вольность сумления, незачетность особы и помешанных, эти правы человека создаются актуальной часткой программы сучасного одрачения Беларуси. Хоть эти правы и свободы записаныя ў Канстытуцыі Рэспублікі Беларусь, яны гвалтуюцца аўтакратычным дзяржаўным апаратам, номенклатурнымі чыноўнікамі. Люди вчерашнего дня, чужие демократичным принципам, ворожья справе национального отраджения Беларуси, имкнутся сдушить дух свободы, и в белорусском громадстве стрымать обновление культурных вартостей, згвалтить и скомпрометовать идею экономичных реформ. Суверенитет и незалежность державы стали объектом гандлю поміж недемократичным урадом Республики Беларусь и операторами Российской империи. Великая историчная дата, день 25 сакавіка, игноруются официальными уладами на Беларуси. Правы человека не дочекались своего дня. Номенклатурное чиновництво, милиция, прокуратура и нават войска, участвуя у ганебную акцию заполоханного и переследу громадства. Сдушенные свободы. Номенклатура, якая служила попереднему режиму, зачистая историчную правду про злочинство этого режиму, у тим ліку і про акти геноциду, як об гэтым сведчыць нежадание уладов выявить и осудить спраўцаў массовых расстрелов мирного жыхарства у Куропатках. У сувязі с угодками абвешчання незалежности Белорусской Народной Республики головное право белорусско-американского сочиночения, закликая своих сябров, усіх сумленных людей падтрымоўваць справу ужыццяўлення ідэалаў БНР, спрыяць дэмакратызацыі Рэспублікі Беларусь, мацаванаю ейнага матэрыяльнага і культурнага дабрабыту, далейшаму разбудаванню дэмакратычнай і незалежнай дзяржавы. Жыве Беларусь! Сегодняшний день традиционно у нас день сбору на газету «Беларусь». Але, коли вы пригадываете апошний конгресс база, где редактор нашего часопису у Калифорнии «Белорусское ревью» выказал жаль, что мы трактуем гэты англамоўны часопіс як чужое дзіця, не ўспамінаючы тут праўдзівага тэрміну, які ў Беларусі ужываецца. Я хочу сказаць, што гэтыя каперцікі, якія сягоння тут знаходзяцца, будуць адзінакава раздзеленыя між беларусам и белорусским ревью. Прошу вас, наверное, запомнить. Белорусско-американское зачиночення атрымала целый ряд привітанняў от наших братніх организаций с батькаўшчыны, ад Беларускага народнага фронту, а таксама тут, на чужине, ад Беларускага кангрэсавага камітэту, ад Беларускага задзіночанага камітэту у Канадзе, координаційного комітету у Чикаго, відділу белорусько-американського зачиночення у різних городах Сполучених Штатів Америки. З увагою на те, що час наш уже кончається, і старшина цієї організації святкавальної просив мене скорочаться, прошу ласково усіх їх привітати аплодисментами.
Ради Білоруської Народної Республіки доктор Єзеф Сажич, який знаходиться сперва у штаті Флорида, просив передати усім вам його найлепші пожелання, привітання зі святом і найлепші пожелання. Летась, як пригадується, ён святкаваў 75-й угодкі абвешчання незалежнасці Беларусі разам з беларускімі патрыётамі ў Менску. І у міжчасе, як ведама, адбываюцца змены, ёсць пэўная пагроза суверэннасці рэспублікі і так далей. Розныя людзі думаюць па-рознаму, розныя весткі прыходзяць. Доктор Сажич, старшыня Рады БНР, выказвае сваю пэўнасць, што у канчальным выніку ідэя незалежнасці Беларусі пераможа, і беларускі народ дачакаецца поўнасці сваёй незалежнасці, дэмакратыі і свабоды. Я хочу коротко таксама прачытаць прывітанне ад Беларускага народнага фронту адраджэння з Менску. Дарагія суродзічы, ад імя сойму БНФ адраджэння шчыра віншуем усіх сяброў і прыхільнікаў фронту з галоўным нашым нацыянальным святам Днём незалежнасці Бацькаўшчыны. Павольна і няпроста юрыдычная незалежнасць Беларусі напаўняецца рэальным зместам. Супраціў антынезалежніцкіх і камуністычных сілаў не слабее. Навісла рэальная пагроза адкрытай здрады кіраўнічай наменклатуры, якая гатовая зноў аддаць Беларусі ў капцівы двухгаловага арла за свае дачасныя інтарэсы. Зноў у Беларусі парушаюцца правы чалавека, душыцца свабода прэсы, пераследуюцца лідары рабочага руху, арганізатары нядаўных антыурадавых страйкаў. Задумано и здійсняется уведение посады президента таким чином, как ее занял номенклатурный лидер. И все ж неухильно расте национальная сведомость нашего народу, все больше и больше людей переконываются, что только в незалежной Беларуси возможно створить демократичное громадство, основой здоровой экономики и заможной господарки, что незалежная Беларусь – гарантия перспективы культурного отроджения и духовного процветания нашего народа. Сусветная супольнасць павінна ведаць праўду аб тым, як Беларусь спрабуюць ператварыць у паліцейскую дзяржаву, як намагаюцца пазбавіць яе незалежнасці наўсуперак волі народу і ў інтарэсах прарасійскай номенклатуры. У пашырэнні такой праўды вялікую ролю маглі б адыграць вы, дарагія суродзічы, і тым здзейсна спрычыніцца да захавання і канчатковай перамогі ідэалаў 25 сакавіка. Ад душы зычым усім вам поспехаў і плёнаў ва ўсіх справах у гэты святочны дзень. Подписали Зенон Позняк, старшиня БНФ отраджения, Валентина Трегубовец, старшиня комиссии замежных справов, и Винцук Вечорка, старшиня политичной комиссии.
The Belarusian community. He's the honorary president of the Captive Nations Committee. Mr. Horst Ulich, please. Would you please come to the microphone, sir?
Madam President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege for me to represent the captive nations and bring you greetings and well wishes to your 76th anniversary of the independence of Belarus. We all know that in the struggle for freedom, we can't be isolated or alone. We do have to understand that freedom, like friendship, can only continue when we work for it and we dream about it with all our heart. Today we hear the mass media saying communism is a thing of the past. But we, from the captive nations who have suffered, we know better. We know that the oppression still lingers on, and we do have to understand that in the struggle for total freedom of all the captive nations, we need friends in Washington, we need friends in the former or present captive nations. It is tremendously important that the torch of freedom be held high here in the United States, because we do encourage nations and people. If we have watched, for example, Afghanistan, the many demonstrations held in New York City led to a certain result for the first step to freedom. And if we have seen just on November 9, 1989, a historical event when the Berlin Wall came crumbling down, it was against the wish of the United States, it was against the wish of Russia, and England was furious. Even the West Germans were not there with all their hearts. Here we saw the divine power of God in action, but somehow it went unnoticed. We saw when a small group had a small sign up on a church which read, "Fasting and prayers." And when we saw the result at the end, when millions of people were on the street and no tanks were there anymore to destroy this freedom, then the wall came crumbling down and brought freedom not only for the East and West Berliners that they could visit each other, but it brought freedom, or the beginning of freedom, throughout Eastern and Central Europe. We have to see when we want to expose the ideas of freedom to the world, we have to have a vehicle from which we operate. And I can assure you, the Captive Nations Committee, it's a very good vehicle. I do know, and I think especially Dr. Schukeloitz, who has for many years participated in this event, and many of you did. Again, I invite you to this Captive Nations Week, which has been proclaimed by the President of the United States, many governors, and mayors of various cities. I ask you, if you have any problems at home in Belarus, bring it to the events of the Captive Nations, and it will be highlighted over there. I thank you for having me over here, and again, best wishes and greetings from the Captive Nations Committee. Long live a free and independent Belarus. Thank you.
Холородного порогу. Это драматичный твор, который написанный Аллой Саскавец. Яна сама активная шабровка спадчыны. И этот твор описывает почуцці спавяданні жанчыны, качарыны, которая варочаецца назад у свой родны кут пасля таго, як яна была высланая ад сваёй зямлі дзеля чарнобыльскай катастрофы. Жанчына прыходзіць назад, пролазіць праз дрот, каб дабрацца да сваёй хаты, і пачынае тады сваю споведь. Выканае гэты драматычны твор спадарыня Рыма Маленчанка, знаная і заслужаная артыстка у Беларусі. Зараз, за одну минуточку, як тільки счистять сцену, ми побачимо гэты твор.